Hey, how's it going? Hope you're well. In today's video, we're going to be following on with our Through the Bible in 1 year Bible study, and we're going to pick up where we left off, covering Genesis chapter 8. So, just a little recap from last video, we had Noah and his family, his wife and his 3 sons and their 3 wives entering the ark, basically, and the ark was the safe haven for the world, as God poured out water to destroy all living creatures on the face of the earth. So we're picking up where we left off in the narrative in Genesis chapter 8, and we'll just read and obviously take it from there. So Genesis chapter 8, starting at verse 1. Okay, and God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. So I want to stop here for a few things. Now, obviously, we see that there's, in my opinion, time and time again, words that stand out to me. Okay, assuaged, stopped, restrained, returned, abated. Okay, and with all of those descriptive words, we're talking about what God did to the water, and I feel like the scripture talks about it in that sense because it's showcasing God's power. Okay, you see how when we went through Genesis chapter 1 and we're reading about creation, we hear God say this and this, and it happens. Okay, the same way we're seeing here that God is deciding when the water's going to stop and what the water's going to do. Okay, I believe it's showcasing for us God's power, and just showing us that He's in control. Okay. One thing that's also important, and I'm going to cover it as we go through the video, is talk about the timeline. Okay, timeline for me has been something of importance to me as I read through the Bible these days, because maybe the first couple of times you're reading through and around the Bible, you're not focusing on everything. It's impossible for you to focus on every little thing, but as you build layers from reading the scriptures, new things pop out. Okay, and one of the things that popped out to me in recent years is the fact that God has these subtle ways of telling us the timeline. We don't always know specifically where we are, but once you notice this, as you read through the scriptures, you'll start to see just little nuances that God will do to give you some sort of indication of what's actually going on. Okay, so we read last chapter, okay, in chapter 7, that the floods prevailed. The floods came down for 40 days. Okay, and now we're hearing, and we talked about how it was 150 days that the waters were over the earth, etc. Okay, so this is a sort of a summary as well. We're hearing again about these 150 days. Now, from the moment he entered the ark, we read about it was the 600th year of his life, and it was the 17th day of the 2nd month. Okay, so by the time we're finished, we're going to be at the 2nd month on the 20th day. So we're going to go over a year, okay, to tell this narrative. So just by picking up here, we see that from the 17th day of the 2nd month to the 17th day of the 7th month would be 150 days. Okay, because I guess generally most people believe that we're not dealing with 365-day years as we are today. We're dealing with 360-day years. Okay, so 150 days will take you from the 17th day of the 2nd month to the 17th day of the 7th month. Now, so we know for 150 days that's what's happened. Now, we also get this piece of detail that the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Okay, now some people say Turkey, modern day Turkey. Some people will say other places. What I will say is this, okay, by God leaving this piece of information, it has already, and I'm sure until it's revealed or whatever. Okay, the end of the world. We're gonna see people searching for the ark. Okay, and I don't believe it's impossible that the ark would be found. Okay, but there you go. Just because of one little phrase here, the mountains of Ararat, people have been searching for hundreds of years for where the ark is. Okay, and I think it's interesting that God told us or allowed us to know where the ark rested. Okay, so verse 5, and the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. Okay, so on the first day of the 10th month were the tops of the mountains seen. So we've had these 150 days. Okay, the arks rested on the mountains of Ararat, and then about 73 days later, we see that the tops of the mountains are now being visible. Okay, and it came to pass, verse 6, at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a raven which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. Okay, so we've seen the 10th month now, 40 days later now. So this will take us to about the 10th day of the 11th month. Okay, Noah opens up the window. He's sending out a raven, which the scripture says is going to and fro. Okay, and he also sent out a dove, which says sent out and came back. Okay. Okay, in verse 9 it says, but the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her and pulled her in unto him into the ark. Okay, so the dove went out, couldn't find any place to rest, so it came back, and Noah brought the dove back into the ark. Okay, and then it says he stayed yet another 7 days. Okay, and he sent forth the dove out of the ark. Okay, so 7 days later would be at the 17th day of the 11th month. Okay, what does it say this time? Verse 11, it says, and the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. So Noah knew in order for a dove to go and get a leaf, okay, it would mean that the waters were probably off the earth now. Okay. Okay, verse 12. And he stayed yet another 7 days and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more. So another 7 days later, we're at the 24th day of the 11th month. He sends out the dove again. This time the dove doesn't return. Okay. So now he literally knows he could actually come out of the ark, more likely than not. Okay. But what we read next is interesting. Verse 13. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Okay, so what we see now is 37 days later, okay, about 37 days later, the waters are dried out and the covering from the ark is removed. Okay, then the next verse we see, and in the 2nd month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month was the earth dried. Okay, so now the 20th day of the 2nd month, this is 50 days later, the earth is now dried. Okay, and this is when things start to start heating up. And I drew a quick diagram. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Okay, just literally just a little timeline of what's actually happening, the days, how many days it takes, etc., and lost a little bit of information. And it's good, obviously, just for timeline purposes, for you to see what's actually going on. So after this time has now elapsed, okay, over a year, okay, God starts talking to Noah and says, go forth of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with thee. Okay, bring forth with thee every living thing that with thee, of all flesh, of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Okay, and Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife and his son's wife with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, after their kinds went forth out of the ark. Okay, so God's saying, come out now after a year, and they're coming out. Okay, so what does it say next? The first thing Noah did when he left the ark, it says, and Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Okay, now I think this is very insightful, and it's a lesson for believers. Okay, reading this to see that in the midst of, or after God delivered him from something this big, okay, the first thing it says in the scripture that he did was build an altar and take of all the clean beasts and offer them, and offer some of them for an offering. Okay, now this is important because it gives us insight. Okay, when God delivers you from things, what do? Do you stop to say thanks? Okay, do you just run away? Okay, I'll give you a personal example today. When I was driving, the place I wanted to park, there was nowhere to park. Okay, and I'd went somewhere, and by the time I'd come back on the way, I was saying, God, to make a way for me. And by the time I had got back to where I'm parking up, there was a great space right in front of where I'm going. Okay, and when I went inside, I remembered and I said, God, thank you for making a space for me. Okay, because it's so easy for you to just go about your business and think that it's just you, but these are the things God does for us time and time again. If we're just thinking about these things, we'll see them. Okay, Noah knew exactly what was happening. Noah knew that it was only by God's grace that him and his family were saved, and based on that, the first thing he wanted to do was offer a sacrifice to God to say thank you, okay, for delivering me. Okay, so that's important for you to think about what you do when God does things for you. Okay, remember to be thankful. Now, on top of that, it's important because we read that God said take sets of 7 clean and sets of 2 unclean. Now, this is obviously insights into one of the reasons why God did that, because if they just took 2 sets of clean animals, when Noah offered sacrifices, extinction would be prevalent already. Okay, so that's easily one of the reasons why I believe God told him, apart from the fact that they're obviously clean animals. Okay, so after he built an altar and made a burnt offering, verse 21, it says, and the Lord smelled a sweet savor. Okay, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. Okay, and he says, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So this is important for a couple of reasons. Okay, we're reading about Noah building an altar and making an offering, and God smelling there being a sweet savor. Okay, so God accepted his offering. Okay, remember we've read earlier about Abel and Cain and their offerings. We're reading again about a man here making an offering to God, and this time God accepts his offering. Okay, on top of that, we also see that God says something interesting. When man sinned through Adam, okay, God cursed the ground. But we now see that God is saying, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. Okay, so for me, that should make you think, if God's already cursed the ground, why would he curse it again? It doesn't make any sense, in my opinion anyway. Okay, and what that leads me to believe is that through the flood and all of this situation happened, the curse was finished. Okay, now what you might not understand, or what you might not realize, is that in God's eyes, the flood destroyed the world. Okay, and this was a new world, and you might not get it from what's going on here, but if you read in the New Testament, Peter's second epistle, okay, chapter 2 and chapter 3, you see Peter talking about the old world. Okay, and he talks about God destroying the old world, and he talks about pretty much the new world, okay, being after the flood. Okay, that's where you might hear people talk about, well, the world structure may have been different before the flood than it is for what we have now. Okay, that's one of the things people talk about. Wow, we have less life now, okay, because the world is constructed differently, okay. But it's important to know that from God's perspective, the world was destroyed, okay, and He, I don't want to say created it again, but you can kind of get what I'm saying, basically. So it makes sense now, if that's the case, for me anyway, when God's saying, I will not again curse the ground anymore, because from God's perspective, everything was new, okay, and He was starting again. And then God says here, while the earth remains, there's going to be seed time, okay, and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, okay, day and night. All of these things are still in place. So I guess at some point, these things are going to be done away with, and you'll read about some of that stuff later on in the scriptures, okay. But that's literally chapter 8, a nice compact chapter there, a piece of text which we can jump into and get loads of information.